guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with a video with all my palettes. As you can see, this is a little bit of a different video for me. If you can probably see by the title already what I'm doing today, but I am actually by myself in the flat for the first time in a couple of months because of lockdown and everything, because my boyfriend has actually gone up to his parents. So I thought I would torture myself a little bit. No, but jokes aside, I am actually going to tackle my palettes today and do like a fantasy declutter, and this video was inspired by Sarah Rose. She did this video, I saw it on her channel. She got the idea I think from one of her subscribers, and I thought that was an amazing idea and I would really kind of wanted to do it. So that's what I'm going to do today, which is why all my palettes are laying out right here. I do have a glass of wine at the ready because I'm guessing this is not going to be like the easiest task to do. But let's just jump into this video. So I really hope the angle today is okay. I'm sitting up here and I'm just going to kind of grab palettes and talk about them. So how I think I'm going to tackle this, let's just start with the stats. I do currently have 39 palettes in my collection. Some of them are relatively new, but yeah, I have 39. So technically I could keep 19.5 palettes. I'm not sure like how many exactly I'm going to keep. I'm going to aim for 19, but if I get to 20 that's still fine because it's basically like half of my collection. But how I'm going to tackle this is I think I'm going to grab palettes that I 100% want to keep and then 100% like would declutter if I was theoretically decluttering half of my collection. And then I'm going to tackle kind of the in-between palettes when we see how many we have on each side. So right off the bat I can see one palette that I definitely would keep, and that is this baby bird here. This is the Club Nebula palette from Kaleidos in collaboration with Anja Nyqvist. It's one of my newer palettes in my collection and it's such a stunning palette, and I would definitely keep this one. I haven't played around with this one too much yet, but it's a stunning palette and I know that I would definitely keep this because it's a very unique color story. It's really new to my collection, it's very treasured in my collection, and yeah, the shimmers in here are also fantastic, so I would definitely keep this one. Another palette that I would definitely keep is this very reflective baby right here. This is the Natasha Denona Gold palette. Again, this is a palette that I haven't really played around with too much yet, but it is a really treasured palette in my collection. I got this for Christmas last year from my parents, and it's a really high quality palette, and if I could only keep a couple kind of neutral palette, I know this would probably be my number one, so this one would also definitely stay. So it's quite difficult deciding on which would be 100% staying because I do love a lot of palettes and a lot of these I would like to keep, but I just kind of thinking about like thinking more kind of strategically, and like I don't want to overwhelm myself with too many keeps before I have decided on the rest. So I might actually go ahead and move on to some definite declutters if I would declutter half of my collection. And the first one is actually this one right here, which is my Juvia's Place Masquerade mini palette. This one is actually a really beautiful palette. It looks like this and it is stunning. The quality in here is amazing, but for some reason I just am not inspired by this. Let's compare it actually to the Magic Mini palette really quickly. And the Magic Mini is right here, and hopefully you can see by the difference on the packaging here that this is very well loved. It's very kind of beaten up, and also on the inside you can see that as well. But I got these two palettes at the same time, and as you can see the Magic Mini palette, which is this one on the left, is very kind of much more loved. It's also more inspiring to me, although originally I thought that the Masquerade Mini would be kind of more something that I would enjoy because it has the neutrals, you have a couple pops of purples. The blues I'm not too sure about. The Magic Mini actually intimidated me a lot in the beginning, but it's become one of my favorite palettes in my collection, so I would definitely I think keep the Magic palette, but I would declutter the Masquerade Mini palette. And with this Masquerade Mini palette, there's a couple shades in here that I would definitely like love to keep, and if I didn't have that many palettes in my collection I would probably keep this, but since I have neutrals everywhere else, this kind of half disappears. And then yeah, there are a couple unique blues in here, but I know I definitely have this kind of blue in my collection. I do have a lot of purples. The green, I'm sure that I have something similar. This hot pink is quite unique though, but I do have other pinks in my collection, and I just feel like this is not as unique as the Magic Mini. Another two palettes that I would definitely declutter are these two right here. These are currently in my Pandos eyeshadows as my two focus palettes, and it is the Naked original and the Naked 3. The Naked, you obviously have seen these, but this is the original Naked palette. I would declutter this because it's getting really old in my collection. It's just, I don't know, it's time to go. I've had this since 2012. I mean, I think it's 9 years in June. I think, yeah, 9 years this June, so it's getting really old, and I definitely have better formulas in my collection now, although this is a palette that I really like, and overall the quality is still decent. So I think this is a palette that I would keep if it was a couple of years ago, but now I just have more elevated formulas in my collection. A more kind of difficult one to declutter would definitely be the Naked 3. I like the tones in here much better. I really come to love mauve tones, but I'm sure again I have these mauve tones everywhere else, and to be honest, there's a couple shades in here that I really like. Majority kind of these top, I think 7 shades. The last 5 though I don't really love, and I do definitely have dupes for these kind of taupey shades. It's more kind of these shades here that I might be lacking, but I'm sure that if I pulled throughout the different palettes that I have, I would be able to dupe those shades out as well. And again, this is a bit older, although not as old as the other one. I think this might be like probably 7 years old, so still old, but not nearly as old as the original Naked palette. But yeah, if I had to declutter half of my collection, this would go as well. Okay, I just thought of a couple of palettes that I know that will also declutter, and that is some of my Colourpop kind of 12-pan palettes. Let's start with these two right here. These two would definitely go as well. The Yes Please palette looks like this. It is a beautiful palette, but I feel like it's a bit outdated now. The shimmers in here aren't my favorite. They're not as kind of sparkly as I like them nowadays. And the kind of mattes, they're really nice, but they're just not my kind of favorite formula anymore. And yeah, I just feel like I have a lot of warm tones everywhere else. And there is a palette that I would keep instead of this, which is actually my newest palette, which I haven't shown to you guys yet. Let's just pull that up quickly to show you why I would declutter this as well. Because that is the Sunrise palette from Novena. I got this about a week ago now. I haven't actually put it on my eyes yet, but it is a stunning palette, and it has those kind of warm tone shades. But comparing it to the Yes Please palette, I feel like it's used a bit kind of more modern. It's not as kind of outdated in my opinion, and there is also crossover over these shades, although this kind of leaves more orangey and this one leaves more kind of reddy burgundy almost, but with those orangey yellow tones as well. So this one would be decluttered, and I think I would definitely keep this one. I mean, it is my newest palette, so I definitely still value this in my collection, so this one would stay, this one would go. Then the other Colourpop palette that I pulled up when I pulled those two up were my Give It To Me Straight palette, which is actually a combination of the Give It To Me Straight and the I Think I Love You palette. This is probably a palette that I have been quite close to decluttering anyway, because I just don't reach for it. I did put those two palettes together to reach for them more, but I haven't reached for this one since I did that. And it just shows me that I don't really kind of feel like I need this in my collection. I have these neutral tones elsewhere. And I do have these kind of mauve tones, which I talked about in the Naked 3 palette, that I would appreciate having, but I still feel like it's not necessary. And if I could, I would ideally kind of depot a few of these shades and then declutter the palette. And I might actually do that still in real life and not just in the fantasy declutter. But in the fantasy declutter, this one will definitely be one that would go. Okay, so we're doing good. I've actually decluttered 5 and only kept 4, but I know it's going to get much harder the further in we get. Another palette that I would declutter, if I had to declutter one, would be my Modern Renaissance right here. Again, I would mainly declutter this because it is so old. This palette I've had since end of 2014, I believe. So it is another palette that is getting quite old. I have quite a few pans in here. It's been a love palette. There was a time when I absolutely adore this. I only wore it on special occasions because it was my #1 palette. It was so kind of revolutionary, a formula that I never tried, and a formula that I really loved, and I still do like it. But again, the color story is a bit outdated. The shimmers in here are not that impressive, and I feel like mattes have started changing a bit and they have become more crumbly. So this would be a palette that I would also declutter if I was decluttering half of my collection. Okay, so we come to a point where I'm feeling like it's starting to become quite difficult. I mean, there's definitely palettes in here that I love, but again, I don't really want to like put too many in the keep pile yet, because I really just want to see kind of what color story I have in the keep pile as it is. So I kind of want to get through some of the declutter things first and then kind of narrow it down afterwards. So I'm going to continue on with the declutters, and I can actually see 2 palettes that I would also pick out and declutter if I had to, and that is these 2 palettes right here. Let's start with the Colourpop one because I've already mentioned a couple of Colourpop palettes. This one is the Dream Street palette, and again it is a beautiful palette and I do quite like it. Mine is a little bit different. I have switched out the shade Sweet Dream because the one that was in here originally I just really didn't like. I had it in my pan of eyeshadows and I hated the formula, so I decided to pop that out and change out the shade. But other than that, this is the original Dream Street palette and I do like it. It's a really cool colour story. I feel like it is like a really nice kind of different neutral palette because it has those pop of colors. It has this really stunning kind of taupey green shade and the tones are just really nice. But if I had to declutter a couple palettes, I know this wouldn't be the neutral palette that I would reach for the most. I do already have the gold palette that I kept, and I know that I would keep, for example, the Soft Glam, which is up there, rather than this one. So this one would also be, unfortunately, one that had to go. The other one that I mentioned is this one right here from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Easy Eye palette for the Charlotte Darling look. I can never remember that. And this is a palette that I can clearly not open. But this is a palette that is used kind of like a warmy, kind of warm rosy tones. And I actually haven't used this at all. This is a palette that I got for free when I did an order at Charlotte Tilbury. And I was really grateful for it. And I'm sure this will come in like handy at some point. And I have kept it in my collection because the formula seems to be so nice. The mattes are really kind of smooth and buttery. The shimmer seems nice too. They're not like the most kind of sparkly shades, but the palette just seems to be a really nice quality palette overall, and it's very compact. The packaging also feels very luxurious and very sturdy, and yeah, it's a nice palette. But if I had to declutter half of my collection, this would definitely be one that had to go because I'm not very inspired by this palette. So we have 8 declutters so far, so we're doing decently. I still have a long way to go to actually like meet my goal. So let's just keep going. Oh, another palette that I would declutter would be this one right here. This is the Mint to Be palette, and I have mentioned several times that this is one of my least favorite Colourpop palettes. I just feel like the tones in here aren't kind of the most unique. They're not, I don't know, they're just kind of very similar. And obviously this is a monochromatic palette, but it's just not very inspiring to me. And I feel like the shades doesn't go that deep, and it's just like a very kind of meh palette to me. I have kind of fallen in love with it more though recently when I was panning the shade Mojito Mami in my whole collection for the pan. And I'm currently actually having this in my shop mustache as well, so I have reached it for a few more times, and I have found more of appreciation for this palette now than I had before working on it. But if I had to declutter half my collection, this would still be one that had to go. This is another Colourpop 9-pan palette that I would kind of declutter. This is another one that's kind of frankened by me. This is the... oh, actually now when I'm looking at it, it's such a stunning palette, and I was thinking I would declutter this because I had the Sunrise palette, but these shades are actually quite bright and like unique. Also, if you do see a few shades missing like in this corner right here, it is because I have them in my Z palette because I'm working on them in different projects, and I thought I wouldn't take them out and just paste them back in to film this video, so they are still missing. But yeah, I feel like you can still get an idea of the color story without putting them back. But this is actually oh, this was gonna be a declutter, but now looking at it, it might be a maybe. Oh, it's difficult. I know this is when it was going to start being difficult because I'm running out of palettes that I would declutter. But yeah, I'm going to put this back for now, but I might declutter this in a second once I get to kind of like a lower amount of eyeshadow palettes. Okay, so my camera actually overheated, so I zoomed in a bit and I moved more palettes into like the center. And I'm going to go through a few more palettes and declutter. I'm going to stick with what I've done and just kind of continue decluttering and then tackle the kind of more difficult ones towards the end. So another one that I can see now that I want to declutter is actually this palette right here, which is my palette that I'm panning at the moment. I'm not going to open it up because I am posting my update for this on Sunday, I believe, so I don't want to open it up and spoil anything, but I'm sure you've seen the Naked Basics palette before. This would be one that would be decluttered because I like it, but It's just so basic that it's not a palette that I would keep if I could only keep half of my collection. Okay, one that is a bit more difficult is actually my Aha Honey palette. I like this palette. I like the yellows that are in here, but again, I'm missing one shade, and also the middle shade I switched out, which was Pressed Glitter. It is a palette that I like, but it's just so kind of monochromatic. It is just yellows, and I feel like I would get yellows elsewhere, both from the Magic Me palette, from the Sunrise palette. I have a few singles, and yeah, I feel like I would be covered with yellows elsewhere, so this would also be a palette that I would declutter. Although quite new in my collection, I picked this up last December. This is also a palette that I think I would declutter, which is the Anastasia Prism palette. I have actually hit pan on 3 shades in this palette this year, and I do really like this palette. I really appreciate the color story. I like that it's kind of dark and grungy, but it has those kind of lighter colors mixed in with it. The shimmers are really nice. I love this yellow shade right here. And it's just a beautiful palette, but if I could only kind of keep half my collection, I feel like this has a lot of overlapping shades from other palettes. So this would unfortunately be one that would go. So I have 12 palettes decluttered, which is pretty good so far. I'm happy with that, but let's just keep going. Another palette that I think would unfortunately have to go if I had to declutter half of my collection is this palette right here, which is the Framecation palette from Those Colors. This is an absolutely stunning palette, and I love this palette so much. It has some beautiful shimmers, and they're very kind of special in my collection. This was kind of one of the first special shade eyeshadow palettes that I picked up, but since then I have a lot of special indie shades that would kind of cover my need for these really cool shimmer shades, although I don't really feel like I have to make dupes of these 2 shades. But if I had to declutter, like, I couldn't keep this palette just for those 2 shades. So because of that, I would actually declutter this one, because all of the matte shades I have in other palettes, and yeah, I can't keep this palette around just for those couple of shimmer shades that are stunning. So yeah, this would be another one that would have to go. Okay, we're down to some like where it becomes really difficult for me. I have 13 palettes decluttered, so ideally I would have to declutter 6 to 7 more of these to become to hit that halfway point. And at the moment I can't really see any more palettes that I would like to declutter, so I think what I'm going to do next is just move on to another kind of couple palettes that I would definitely keep, and then take it from there. Okay, so one palette that I would definitely keep is my Anastasia Jackie Aina palette. I love this palette. I really do. It's stunning. The quality in here is amazing. The shimmers are really good. This shade Sponsor is one of my favorite shades in like a mainstream palette. I love this. This would definitely have to stay. And I feel like by keeping this, I add a lot of kind of special shades, like a lot of kind of diversity in my collection, because I don't really have much of these kind of purples and pinks. Same with like a red shimmer or a purple shimmer, this duochrome, some really sparkly shade, and this would be a really good kind of neutral palette with a tweak, I think. So this would definitely stay as well. Another neutral palette that I would keep is my Novena palette. I like this so much. I have actually grown to love this so much in this past year, because I had a couple of shades in here in my AUC project pan, and you can also see that I have those pans in here now. I love this palette. It's such a unique kind of, again, neutral palette, because I would still count this neutral palette, but it has those pinky tones, those purple tones, but it still has those kind of warm tones put in with it. So this would also stay. I like this so much, and I feel like this would be a palette that I would really add a lot to my collection if I could only keep 19. Let's move on to another one that I would keep, because I don't really have too many neutral palettes in my collection, and that is the Sultry palette. I really like this palette again. I like the Anastasia formula, and I'm keeping quite a few of them, although I have decluttered I think 2 of them so far, but this one would stay as well. It's kind of the most cool tone palette that I have in my collection, and I have these kind of cool grey shades, these kind of more pinky tones, these taupey shades, cool bronzes, and it's a really good palette. I think this is discontinued now. I think they brought it back last year for Christmas, but I'm not sure if it's still available, but if it is, I do really recommend it, because it's a beautiful, really like wearable, cool toned palette. I think what I'm going to do next is, because all the neutral palettes that I have left, I'm going to put to the side, and I'm going to compare them to the neutral palettes that I have kept, used to kind of narrow it down a bit. So I'm going to start by taking those out, and then I'm going to look at the remaining palettes. Okay, so I have taken out like the most neutral palettes out of this pile, so I'm putting them to the side for now, and then I'm going to tackle the rest, because this is where kind of I have a lot of colors in my collection, and I feel like I haven't kept too many colorful things. I kept the Club Nebula, and then I have a few colored shades scattered around the palettes that I kept, but it's mainly used kind of neutral palettes. So I'm going to go through and kind of look through these and decide what kind of colored palettes I would keep. So I'm going to start with one that I'm definitely keeping, and that is the Lilac You A Lot palette. This is one of my favorite Colourpop palettes. I absolutely love it. I think the tones in here are really stunning. This purple here is one of my favorite purples in my collection. I just really like it. So this will definitely stay, and because I'm keeping the Lilac You A Lot palette, I think I would actually declutter the It's My Pleasure palette. I feel like these two, there are a few overlapping shades, and this is a bit deeper, but if I were keeping this one, I think the It's My Pleasure would have to go. So this one would stay, and then this one will go. Let's look at my kind of green palette. So I have this one, obviously. I have this one. This one actually could maybe go in the... Oh, this is difficult. The shade in the middle here is like a green shade, like a minty shade. I'm going to put this with my greens as well, I think. So I believe these are kind of my main green palettes. Although Subculture also have quite a few green shades in it. Or actually not that many. I thought it was more than it is. But these three right here are my main green palettes. And obviously I'm going to keep the Tribe. The Tribe palette is such a stunning palette. It is like super unique. It has some really cool tones to it. I feel like these greens are beautiful. They are... kind of like they have a twist to them. This is a bronze with a green shift. This is like a iridescent shade with a green shift. This green here is stunning. It's such a vibrant green shade. This is like a pastel kind of yellowy green. It's stunning, and yeah, this would definitely stay. This one right here is a beautiful neutral kind of browny green to do like use with green looks, and it's a perfectly made palette in my opinion, so this would definitely stay. I am going to leave it out here though so I can compare, because with the last two kind of green palettes that I have, we're going to start with the Just My Luck palette. It is difficult because I feel like it's a stunning palette, and they do differ a lot from this palette right here. But again, I have greens elsewhere in my collection, but I don't really think that I have too many green singles. So, However though, I just thought of something. I'm going to keep this to the side. This is the Child palette from Colourpop. I'm going to put this to the side because although it has greens in it, it's a different type of greens than the ones I'm discussing right now. So this one's going to go to the side. But I am thinking of this palette here, which I put in my neutral pile, because this one has a couple of greens in it too. This is the Metropolis Palette from Natasha Denona, and I would probably keep this one. And if I do keep this one and this one, there is quite a few greens. I mean, I have the kind of really bright greens, the light green here, this deep green. Then in here we have this kind of murky green. We have like this, which looks quite deep, but I don't really swatch in this video, but it goes out and it kind of shears out to like a really kind of vibrant green. Hopefully you can see there. So it doesn't look like it's a cream to powder formula, so I feel like that would be one that could kind of cover these greens in here, because I'm going to swatch it again. Because I mean, look at that. Don't they look like exactly the same? This is from the Metropolis palette, this is from the Just My Luck palette. And this palette with these, I feel like these here are kind of the greens that I would be missing. So because of that, I'm actually going to end up decluttering this. The only shade that I really wish I could keep from here is the middle shade. I love Mary Jane, but I'm sure that I have a single that would be comparable to that. So this one will also go, which I'm surprised by, but yeah, this one will be decluttered. And because of that, I'm also going to keep the Metropolis palettes and obviously the Tribe. So because I decided to decluttered both the Just My Luck palette and the Meant to Be palette. I think I will keep the Star Wars palette, and also this I got from my boyfriend, which makes it more special in my collection. It's also quite a unique tone of greens in here. They can have more, I don't know, like swampy kind of greens, I would say. And then, like I said, the central shade which I'm missing is a shade that I'm panning in my pan of eyeshadows at the moment, and it is a minty shade. So I feel like if I keep this, I will have that minty shade in my collection if I do create that look. So this is one that I think I'm going to keep. So far I'm doing quite well. I have 15 palettes decluttered, so I have 4 to 5 more to go. I'm doing better than I thought I would, but it's getting more and more difficult. Okay, so I just had to charge my camera for a little bit, so I decided to place all the palettes like out here. So I know it's not very aesthetically pleasing because some of them are upside down and whatever, but I placed the ones that are remaining here, and I'm going to start again with the kind of colorful ones and then move on to like the more neutral ones. So far I have 15 palettes decluttered, so I need to declutter a few more of these, which is again now when it's getting difficult. But I am gonna start with this palette right here. I know it's a neutral now. I said I'm gonna start with the colorful ones, but I'm just gonna go with what it feels like. This is a stunning palette, and now when I'm opening it I do want to keep it because it has those mauve tones that I love, and I actually don't feel like I've kept too many. It's getting so difficult. Okay, I'm gonna wait with this. I was gonna declutter it, but now I can't do that. However, I'm gonna be cutthroat because this is what, like, again, when it's getting really difficult, because the rest of these I would love to keep. But this palette right here, which is the Golden Coconut palette from Colourpop, I love this palette. It's a beautiful kind of neutral palette, but with like it has a really interesting color scheme and like tone to it, and I would love to keep this. But since I kept the sultry palette and I don't wear cool tone shades too often, and I feel like I have other cool tone shades scattered throughout my collection, I feel like I only need like one dedicated cool tone palette. So this one would be one that I think I would declutter. But looking at it, it's so beautiful and I don't really feel like I want to. But why is this so difficult? Because this is one of my favorite Colourpop palettes as well, and I just love it. But I just have to be cutthroat, so this one has to go. One palette though I think I'm going to keep is this one right here. This one is the NYX Tutorials and Beauty Bay palette. Looks like this. It has a lot of different kind of shades. It has some cool tone shimmers in here too, which I think I would really enjoy, and a lot of different kind of colorful shades. They also have the most beautiful kind of red shade, as you can see there in the center. So this one would stay. It would give me a lot of variety when I want to do colorful looks. So I want to kind of compare something really quickly, because one of the first palettes, I think if not the first palette I want to keep, was the Club Nebula palette, which looks like this. You can all seen this one. It's been all over YouTube. It's a beautiful palette, but the first time I saw this, it really reminded me of a different palette which I have in my collection and I want to compare right now. So I'm going to put this down here so we can see what it looks like. I'm hoping you can see it right there. And the palette I want to compare it to is my Subculture. This is a new palette in my collection, but I just feel like these are very similar. I'm also going to put this down because I feel like, I don't know, I hope that you can see them. It's just annoying for me to hold them up, so I'm going to put them down. Because if you look at it, I feel like these kind of greeny shades, we have this one to replace. We don't really have a blue in here though, but we have these kind of tones in there. We have the grey, which is kind of similar to these. I just feel like there's a lot of overlapping. We have Roxy and Samus, and I love Subculture. I really do. I was worried getting it for so long because people weren't the biggest fan of that palette, but I love it. However, looking at Club Nebula next to Subculture, they give me really similar vibes. This one just seems a bit more saturated than the Subculture, and I know certain shades like Destiny, for example, just looks very grey on the eyes. I love Electric, but again I think I have really similar shades to this in my Cleona shadows. So because of that, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Subculture would be decluttered. Okay, so these right here are the palettes that we still have left. It's getting difficult. So I think since I am getting kind of to a place where I don't have to declutter too many more, I'm gonna go through some of these that I want to keep that were kind of like, oh, if I could just pick out the ones I wanted to keep without any limit, I would have picked those out. And that is first the Sweet Talk palette from Colourpop. I love this palette. It's like a coral palette, and I don't feel like I had kept too many of these shades. I have them scattered throughout my collection, but I don't have a dedicated coral palette or like a peachy palette, and this one is stunning, so I would keep this one. Another one that I would keep is my Soft Glam. Oh, actually, I feel like, it's so difficult because I was going to say it's a beautiful neutral palette, and I feel like, yeah, I am going to keep this. Because I was going to say I have so many neutral palettes that I kept, but this is stunning, and although I love doing colourful looks and incorporating colour in my like everyday looks, but now when I am working I reach for neutral shades more often, and I love this palette. It's one of my favourite neutral palettes, probably tied with the gold palette now, although I haven't played around with that too much, but I just can't let go of this. And also I do have some kind of mauve tones in here if I wanted to play with those tones, so this one would also stay. Another palette that would stay, which is relatively new to me, is the Blueberry Muffin palette. It's a blue kind of tone palette. I don't really have too many blues in my palettes that are like, or at least I don't have like a dedicated blue palette, and this one is really kind of wearable. It's also new. I got this from my boyfriend, so yeah, this one would also stay. I feel like it would add quite a lot to my collection. So I just want to double check how many I've kept and how many I've decluttered to see how many I have left that I need to declutter. Okay, so far I've decluttered 17 and kept 15, which adds up because I do have 7 palettes left. So I'm doing pretty well, but I still have to declutter a few more palettes. And with these, I was going to actually put out all my palettes and kind of compare color stories and see what I had kept and things like that, but I don't feel like I have to. I'll show you at the end kind of what I kept and what I decluttered, but yeah, I feel like I can make a decision without doing that. So I'm going to start with this one. This is the She palette from Colourpop. This is a mix between the She palette and the Elemental Surprise palette, and I love this palette. I have 2 shades missing in here because I'm working on them in different projects, but it's like a mauve tone and then like a kind of duochrome pinky kind of warm with a blue shift. It's the beautiful shades. These are my favorite shades between those 2 palettes, and I love this. It's really pretty. It has a lot of kind of special shades like these here, and that's kind of why I love this so much. But I do have a lot of those special shades elsewhere in my collection now, especially with my singles. So I think this one would be another one that I would declutter. So technically, if I want to declutter 19 and keep 20, I only have to declutter 1 more, but I might try to push myself and declutter 20 so that I actually declutter more than half, because if I declutter 19, it's technically not 50%. So we'll see if I can manage to do that. But out of these, I feel like I'm going to pick out a couple that I think I would keep, and then we're going to make the tough decision to let the final couple palettes go. So this is the Amazing palette. I have waited with putting this in, not because I don't love it, because I do love it, but because I'm not sure if this kind of adds a lot of uniqueness to my collection. But it does have this beautiful blue, these kind of purples. This barb shade is amazing. The rest of this I could do without, but overall I think this does add something, and I do really like this, and it must make me happy. So because of that, I think this is another one that I would keep. So these are the palettes that I have left now, and I still have to do that too if I want to reach that 20, and it's getting really difficult. But let's start looking at this palette right here. This is the Through My Eyes palette from Colourpop, and it's actually one of my favorite Colourpop palettes. Oh god, it's so difficult. Because I was ready to declare this, and then I look at it and it's so stunning, and I feel like it's a beautiful palette with a mix of like neutrals and pops of colors. This right here, by the way, is a really like super bright, vibrant red. It's like a shimmer red, or more like a satiny red. And I have that in my whole collection product pan at the moment, so that's why it's missing. But yeah, this is such a stunning palette, and I was ready to declutter it, but now I feel like I want to keep it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open these all up and look at what I have left. I'm hoping you can see all of the palettes there. This is when it gets difficult. I do feel like, I know I said I wanted to keep this palette, and I still kind of do, but I feel like actually this red here is really similar to the red I'm working on in the Novena palette, and that is kind of, these two shades here are honestly the two that stands out to me the most, and this one I don't really recall having anywhere else that I kept, but again it's just one shade and I can't keep a whole palette for one shade, so this one would also go. You guys, I'm down to one more palette to go. Technically I could stop now because I've declared 19, I kept 20 if I keep all of these, but I still want to push myself and I want to kind of technically hit that declaring half of my collection. So looking at these, actually these two palettes are quite similar. I mean there's a lot of difference, but if you look at the mattes there are a lot of overlap. But this palette here is just such a stunning palette. Honestly, this is so difficult. I'm looking at these four and none of them really stand out to me that I want to declutter them. I think I'm going to shock myself now, but I think the palette that I'm going to declutter out of these is the Deuce palette. I love the Deuce palette. I love this color story so much. I think these are stunning shades, but I have this shade definitely over again in my collection that I kept. I have this shade over and over again in what I kept. This is kind of unique, but I probably have something similar in what I kept. This is a stunning kind of silvery shade, but I have that in the Sultry palette. I also probably think have a similar shade in the Magic palette. This right here is a like pale pink shade. I know there's a similar shade in the Magic palette. This is a beautiful shade, but I have more beautiful duochromes now. These right here are probably the three shades that I am mostly want to keep, but this shade again I think I should probably have something similar. This probably not. Oh, actually I think I have a single that is quite similar to that, and then I missed this green, but I have other greens I kept, so this one would be the one that I would declutter. And with that, you guys, I have done it. I have decluttered half of my collection, theoretically, thank God, because I do not want to kind of do that for real. But what I'm going to do now, because I need to figure out how to fit all the palettes in, I think I will have to do keeps and declutter separately. So I'm going to place all of my keeps first on the floor so you can see them, and then I'm going to show you the declutters afterwards. So here you have all the palettes that I would keep. You can see them all laid out. Not the prettiest layout, but I tried. So we have quite a few Colourpop palettes, not that many. I think I definitely decluttered more than I kept. We have majority of my Anastasia palettes apart from two. We have all of my Natasha Denona palettes, obviously, some Juvia's Place, and then some miscellaneous palettes. But this is what I would keep if I could only keep half of my collection. And counting it up, there is 19. So that is half. So I'm going to go ahead and move these out to the side and put in the ones that I decluttered into the frame. And here we have the palettes that I would declutter if I had to declutter half. And it is 20 palettes here, and it's funny to look at it because it's majority of my Colourpop palettes actually. I think I've really just gone off Colourpop a lot, both because, not just the formula, I mean the formula is fine, I still enjoy the formula, but I just feel like it's not as good as other things that I have in my collection nowadays. And a lot of these palettes are also monochromatic palettes, and I think they got decluttered just because they are so monochromatic. And when decluttering half of my collection, I kind of had to think about, first of all, which palettes I use regularly, but also which gives me a lot of variety, and those monochromatic palettes are just not that. So because of that, I think that's why most of them went. And then we also have a few more, like, oh, actually, I think I said that I decluttered all apart two of my Anastasia palettes, but I actually have three here. I forgot about the Prism palette. We have a few random ones, two Juvia's Place palettes, actually all of my remaining Urban Decay palettes, and yeah, a few miscellaneous ones. So that is what I would declutter if I had to declutter half of my collection at this point. But with that, you guys, I'm gonna wrap up this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, and please go and check out Sarah Rose. Her video will be linked down below, and otherwise I really hope you're having an amazing day, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye guys.